All right. So we are going to be going over our application process today, and some of the larger items that we see come through as incomplete, missing, or having errors. So everybody should have received a link to our applying for a license checklist. The applying for the license checklist is going to be key to ensure that you can make it through our application process with minimal to no errors. Some of the common errors that you will see and we'll discuss throughout this slideshow, our biggest error we see is in bonds. Also personnel matching Arizona Corporation Commission, whether that personnel section is not complete, you're missing personnel, completed background checks for personnel listed on the application, valid and legible IDs, and then testing for qualifying parties. All right, so this here is going to be our applying for a license checklist. So you're going to select whichever checklist fits based on how you are going to be applying. So if you are applying as an LLC or a corporation, the step as far as registering your entity is going to be a little bit different as opposed to if you are applying as a sole proprietorship or a partnership. So you will also get this in the email that goes out after our seminar. This checklist can also be found on our website under applying for a license as well. This is really, really key to follow these steps. You can click on all of the links to the different vendors pertaining to background checks, bonds, Arizona Corporation Commission, all of those things. So I really can't stress enough using this checklist. It has pretty much everything that you'll need to make sure your application gets completed accurately and with minimal to no errors. All right, so the first thing that you're going to need to determine when you are starting your application process is who is going to be the applicant. So there in Arizona, we license the entity or the business. So if you are going to apply as a corporation or an LLC, you'll want to make sure that you register your entity or your business with Arizona Corporation Commission. When you submit your application needs to match your entity name exactly as it appears with Arizona Corporation Commission. If you are applying as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, then it needs to match your names as it appears on your ID. You can also use a DBA. DBA stands for doing business as. You are able to contract under your DBA, and that DBA needs to be included in the application. There is a specific section on your application where you will want to list your DBA. If you are going to be using a DBA, your DBA also needs to be included on your bond. This is one of the major errors that we see is that the DBA is listed on the application, but not the bond or vice versa. So make sure if you're using a DBA, it's listed on your application and your bond. If you're not using a DBA, make sure it's not included in one or the other. We also do recommend that you register your DBA with the Arizona Secretary of State. However, that is not required, but it is highly recommended that you do register it there. Once you have determined who the applicant is going to be or how you're going to be applying, the next thing you will want to determine is your classification for which you are applying for. So we do have a number of license classifications. If you are unsure of which classification you should be applying for, you can always submit what is called a scope determination request. The scope determination request gives us a snippet of what kind of work you're going to be doing. And then at that point, we would identify which license classification would best fit your scope of work. So we have general contracting. So that's going to be like your general residentials or general commercials. We also have engineering contracting, and residential or specialty licenses as well. That's going to be more things like your plumbing, your electrical. So we have about over 144 different classifications. So there's quite a few of them. Like I said, read through our classification section of our website. It gives you a brief description of what that classification does and covers. And if after that you still are unsure of what to apply for, send us that scope request and we'll get that determination to you as soon as possible. So you've identified how you're going to apply, you've identified your classification. The next thing that you are going to identify is your qualifying party. So every license must have a qualifying party. The qualifying party should be the individual who is responsible for the work that is being done under your license. The qualifying party can be an owner, a member, or would need to be a regularly employed individual for the entity. So the qualifying party is going to be required to provide a number of things, not only just, your name, date of birth, social security, a valid and legible driver's license, contact information, a background check that it has been submitted within 90 days. But the qualifying party is also going to be responsible for submitting and passing exams. So there's a couple of exams that the qualifying party will be required to pass. That's going to be the statutes and rules exam and the trade exam. And we'll go over those in a little bit more detail here shortly. The qualifying party is also going to be required to provide the minimum years of experience. So we do have a classification requirements section on our website, and that will explain to you how many years of experience are required for your classification. Jesse also posted it in the chat just now that you can reference. This requirements page will also show you what exams are going to be required as well. So when we talk about experience, we are going to request that you provide us with the dates of experience. Most of our classifications are going to require about 4 years. Some require 2, some don't require any experience at all, like our R62. We're also going to ask you to attest to whether or not that experience was hands-on, supervisory, or education experience. And we will go over waivers a little bit later, but there is also an option to waive if you have an out-of-state or in-state license. We will also request a optional reference for you. So if for whatever reason we needed to call that reference to confirm your experience, we can do that as well. All right, so we're gonna go over waivers. So if you are an out-of-state applicant, meaning that you held a license in another state. So you cannot waive the statutes and rules exam. However, you do have the option of waiving the trade exam. So a couple of things we're going to be looking for when we are looking for that waiving capability is the qualifying party who is going to be named on your Arizona license also named in the same capacity on your out-of-state license? Was that license active within the last 5 years? Is the scope of work comparable to the scope of work that you're going to be doing here? So for example, if you're applying for an electrical license here, we're going to be looking to make sure that the license that you held in another state was also an electrical license. We wouldn't approve a waiver for an electrical license here if your license in California was for plumbing. We're also going to be looking to make sure that there's no unresolved complaints on that out-of-state license. And keep in mind, we do need to be able to verify this information through that out-of-state licensing board or agency. We do not pre-approve waivers. So when you submit your waiver, you'll want to submit it either through your online portal application or you'll submit it with your application documents. There is an out-of-state waiver form that you can complete, the top section of the form, and that you can send that in with your application. If you're applying online through our portal, you will select to waive that. And then we would just ask you to provide that out-of-state license information through our portal.
Hey, Maggie, before we keep going any further, we have a couple questions in the chat. The first one is from Kate Dalton regarding licensing and testing. What do you do if the specialty is not on the list for trade testing? I've already read through all the classifications before this and nothing was in our range. So what would you suggest?
So if your if your trade isn't on our license classifications list, then I would suggest you submit a scope request, and we can look at what classification would best fit your scope of work and send you that determination.
Our other question is from Maggie. Can you please go over what is valid educational experience?
Yes, so you can choose to waive up to half of your experience with a degree that is relatable to the classification for which you're applying for. So if you have like a bachelor's or an associate's degree in construction, engineering of that sort, it has to be comparable to the classification that you're applying for. You would submit to us that information with your transcripts, and then we would look at potentially waiving up to half of your experience requirement with that education. All
Thank
right.
you, Maggie. I think we've got caught up on the questions. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go a little bit into our exams, exactly what they are, where you take them. And like I said, everybody will be required to take the statutes and rules exam. Even if you have an out-of-state license, you do have to take this statutes and rules exam. If you have an in-state license, so you already have an Arizona license that was active in the last 5 years, you will not have to retake the statutes and rules exam. So the statutes and rules exam is going to be specific to Arizona statutes and rules. This is going to be what we call more so of a training course. It is self-paced. It costs $54. You do not have to purchase any reference or study materials. You can download the free statutes and rules book that is available and use that during the exam. You will find the link to the statutes and rules exam through G-Metrics on that applying for a license checklist. Make sure that you follow that link so that you can get in. Once you pass that exam, it should connect to our system and we'll be able to pull up your results for you as well.
I'm going to pause you one more time for a couple questions. So let's see, how long is the statute and rules exam valid for?
Your exams are going to be good for up to 2 years.
And then we had one more question regarding experience. What about military experience?
Military experience can be used as long as it is relatable to the classification for which you're applying for.
And I'm going to go ahead and put a link as well to a section on our website specifically for service members and veterans that has some additional information there. So I'll throw that into the chat. Thanks, Maggie.
There's also another question, if you have schooling, but if you don't have schooling, but you've been involved in 4 new builds from ground up in the last 4 years. So you can attest to either having hands-on experience, supervising experience, and it would just need to meet the minimum years based on the classification that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a B, general residential, which is going to be ground up residential builds, you need 4 years of minimum experience. So if you have 4 years of experience doing ground up builds, and at least 2 of those years are within the last 10 years, then you would meet the experience requirement. As far as regarding experience, how does a professional engineering license apply from California? So if you're unsure of the classification that you would apply for, you can submit a scope. If you have an out-of-state waiver that is comparable to the license classification that you are applying for, then it would waive your trade exam and your experience. As far as a specific trade exam for the A4 drilling, you can refer to that classification requirements document or section of our website, and that will advise you as far as which classifications require a trade exam. But yes, the A4 would require a trade exam. All right, and I think that covers everybody's questions for now. Great questions. So the SRE, like I said, is going to be a training course that is self-paced. The trade exam pertaining to the specific classification is going to look a little bit different. So the trade exam is a proctored exam, meaning there is somebody who is monitoring you taking the exam. It is available in person or online. The cost for the trade exam is going to be $66. There is an additional cost if your trade is going to include solar. The trade exam also is going to require that you purchase your study material. So we'll go over the content outline here shortly pertaining to what that looks like and how you can find your study material. But there are specific items that can be taken into the exam and used in your exam, but you do have to purchase those items. The trade exam also is a little bit different from the SRE, whereas if you do not pass the trade exam the first time, you have to wait 30 days to retake that exam. Whereas the SRE, you can take the statutes and rules exam and you can keep taking it as many times as you need to until you pass. However, I have yet to see somebody fail it since we've updated it. So, but the trade exam is a little bit more difficult. It's more specific to the trade that you are actually applying for. There's going to be more information that is very specific to that trade that you'll be able to find in those study material books.
And how long do they have to take the SRE course once they open it? Oh, Maggie?
You have as long as you want, but keep in mind your exams need to be completed and passed before you submit your application. So if you submit your you want to make sure that you've already taken and passed your SRE before you submit your application. When you log in to take it, you can take your time taking it. I will say it shouldn't take that long, maybe like a day or a couple days at the most. If you can set aside like a chunk of time to go in and take it, it's pretty easy to make your way through it pretty quickly. The trade exam is going to vary depending on your classification for which you're applying for. So the page we're on that you can see right now goes over the content outline of your specific trade. So this we have up here is an example of just the A general engineering. So the time allowed for this specific exam is 240 minutes. But you'll want to go to our PSI candidate information bulletin, and you'll want to find your specific trade for which you are applying for, and then look at the details. So this content outline is going to give you your numbers of questions, the minimum passing score that's required, the time that's allowed. It's also going to give you a reference list. Now, keep in mind, there is a reference list of books that can be used in the exam, and there is a reference list of material that cannot be taken into the exam. So you'll want to make sure to keep an eye on those things, because if you have a book that's not allowed in your exam, you will be kicked out and automatically failed. So make sure to read through your candidate information bulletin so that you have an idea of what your test is going to look like, and what reference materials you can take into your exam. All right, so we've kind of gone over our qualifying party, how we're going to apply, what our classification is going to be. The next thing that we're going to go over is who else is required to be on your application. So if you are applying as an LLC, we will need any owners of 25% or more. And then when looking at Arizona Corporation Commission, we want to make sure that if you are a member managed LLC, all of your members that are listed on Arizona Corporation Commission are also listed on your application. If you are a manager managed LLC, then you'll want to make sure that all of your managers that are listed on Arizona Corporation Commission are also listed on your application. If you are applying as a corporation, again, any owners of 25% or more, and then you'll also want to refer to Arizona Corporation Commission and any officers or directors. So that's going to include your presidents, treasurers, secretary, any of those officers or directors that are listed on Arizona Corporation Commission also need to be included in your application. So what does that mean when we say included in your application? That means they'll need to fill out the part of the application that contains their name, their date of birth, their email, address, contact info. They'll also need to provide a valid and legible ID and a completed background check as well. You will want to make sure that the background checks are all completed before you submit your application. Just like with the testing, you'll want to make sure that is also completed before you submit your application. All right, so background checks are one of our top 5 errors that we see in our applications. The reason being that people submit applications and they have not completed a background check, or the background check is outdated. So any individual who is going to be included in your application must submit a completed background check receipt. So you will not receive the completed background check receipt until your background check has been completed. A lot of times people will go in, they'll submit the information for their background check, and then they'll say, oh, well, I didn't get a receipt. Well, that's because it wasn't completed yet. So it kind of varies on how long it takes for the background check to be completed. If there's felonies, misdemeanors, things like that that need to be looked up, if there are name changes or moves, things like that can also all play a part in how long it takes for the background check to be completed. We are also looking to make sure that that background check was completed within 90 days from when we are receiving your license application. Now, a lot of people get discouraged because they think I have a felony or I have a misdemeanor, and that means automatically I will be denied a license. That is not necessarily true. If you are concerned about your felonies causing you to be denied from receiving a license, then you can submit to us what is called a petition for criminal review. And that's when we would review your felonies and your background prior to you submitting an application. And then you would get the determination as far as whether or not you would be approved pertaining to your felonies. Also, all of our background checks must be done through AccuSource HR. There is a link on our applying for a license checklist that will take you directly there, so you can submit that information. Everybody must submit a background check through AccuSource HR. Even if you were previously ran in a different background check, you still have to submit one through us. So if you do have felonies, you will be required to provide what is called a felony disclosure form, and that form can be found at the bottom of our applying for a license checklist page. And there is additional documentation that you would need to provide to us. So court documents, completion of sentences, things like that can all be included. Like I said, if you would like to do the petition for criminal review prior to submitting your application, you can. But we will also review it in your application. If for whatever reason your felony would require you to not be approved, then we would deny the application after it goes through the review process. Thanks for posting that form, Jesse. All right. Also, we're going to just briefly touch on workers' compensation. So if you have employees, you need to provide us with your workers' compensation policy and the company that is issuing the policy. There are a few exemptions to being required to have workers' compensation, and that is going to be single member, 100% owner-owned entities with no employees, or two member 50-50 ownership entities with no employees. Everybody else, you will need to provide us with workers' compensation. You can, if you have questions pertaining to workers' compensation or the exemption of workers' compensation, we would direct you to contact the Industrial Commission of Arizona. Jonas, so if you are not a citizen when submitting the background check, you still have to do the background check. It can be submitted online, so they don't have to like physically be in the United States. But there is an option in the background check application where you can select that you are not a US citizen, and it will run it that way. All right, so tiered entities. So if your entity or your business for which you are applying for the license with is a tiered entity, meaning your company is owned by another company, then you will need to provide us with what is called a tiered entity organizational chart. So this allows us to see kind of where the ownership ends. So this is an example of what your organizational chart should look like. You will need to create your own organizational chart and submit that with your application when you're ready to submit your application. A couple of key points to your organizational chart. The chart should end in people. So you can see here, Red Corporation is owned by an LLC and a corporation, and those entities are also owned by an LLC and a corporation, which then are owned by persons. So anybody who is listed in the organizational chart that owns 25% or more will need to be included in the application. That is directly or indirectly owns 25% or more of the applicant. We are also looking for the attestation that you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner that says no person or entity other than those listed owns 25% or more. And the chart will need to be signed by an authorized signer who is listed on the application. If for whatever reason your organizational chart does not end in people, so it is an ESOP, an employee stock owned, we would need an additional statement that explains where that ownership ends if it does not end in one or several individuals. All right, bonds. So bonds are our largest error that we see in applications. So if there was any part of this presentation that you were going to specifically pay attention to, this would be it. So we do offer, you can provide a couple different types of bonds. So our most common bond that we see is a surety bond. We do also accept cash bonds or certificates of deposit. So a surety bond, I like to kind of compare it to your car insurance. You pay a monthly premium and a bond company issues you the surety bond, which covers your bond minimums required for your license. So your bond minimums are going to be based on the license classification that you are applying for and the estimated volume of work annually. So when you are going through our portal, if you're using our online portal, which I highly suggest you use our online portal, it's going to ask you what your projected annual revenue will be. Based on your selection, it's then going to advise you of what your minimum required coverage is going to be for your bond. You can also provide a cash bond. You would need to either have a cashier's check or come in and pay that to us directly, and that would sit on your bond. Same thing with a certificate of deposit that you can acquire from a bank. That will have to be submitted to us manually and sit on your license. When it comes to surety bonds, we do have a bond portal. So our bond portal is where a number of bond companies are able to go in and automatically update your bond to your application. So if you are going to be using one of these bond companies that you see listed here that is associated with our bond portal, you'll first want to purchase your bond from them. And then once you submit your application, they will be able to go in and add your bond to your application for you. This is a great way to submit a bond and ensure that it has no errors in it, because we do see a lot of errors that come through with bonds, either not being filled out correctly or not having the correct amounts put in. Which is also why we suggest to use our online portal, because the online portal, once you input your information of what your projected revenue is going to be, it's going to tell you what your required bond amount will be. We do have a bond page that also kind of goes over what the minimum requirements would be. But again, like I said, submitting it through our online portal is going to ensure that you have the correct information there. All right, so if you are going to be maybe using a bond company that doesn't use our bond portal, or you are going to be using, want to submit a physical bond to us, you will need to make sure that our bond form is filled out completely. So some big things to look at is going to be your entity name. So again, this is where that DBA comes into play. If you have a DBA on your application, part 1, you must include it on your bond. This is where we see the most common errors in bonds that come through. Either the DBA is on the bond, but not the application, or it's on the application and not the bond. So we want to make sure that your name matches exactly. Also, you'll want to include your classification. So you'll want to include what classification you are applying for. Again, you can refer to that classifications list. So for example, this one lists a CR7 carpentry license. Keep in mind the CR is a dual, so it covers commercial and residential, which means that you will need to have separate listing of residential penal sums and a separate listing of your commercial penal sums. Also, your effective date of your bond needs to be within 6 months. It cannot be a future date. It needs to be within 6 months from when we have received your application. Your bond should also be notarized and have the signature of the attorney in fact and contain the surety's seal, so the official seal. If you don't have an idea of how much revenue you will make, then you'll need to make sure that you at least cover the minimum requirements for your bond. So it's going to depend on your license classification. So if you are applying for a general residential, your minimum requirement is going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, 9,000 in coverage. If a general commercial, it's going to be 5,000. If it is a specialty residential, your minimum is 4,250 and specialty commercial is 2,500. We do also have those amounts listed on our bond page on our website as well. And I think, yeah. All right, so there are going to be some additional disclosures and additional documents that you may be submitting with your application. So each person on the application is going to be asked to disclose if they were listed on a revoked or suspended license previously. Each person will also need to disclose if they were cited or convicted of any unlicensed contracting. And then here we have that felony disclosure again. So if anybody has any felony charges or pending charges, we would also ask that you complete that felony disclosure form as well. Some additional documentation as well. If your classification is going to be doing solar work, you will need to provide for us a copy of a solar warranty. So we have an example of what a solar warranty could look like on our website. If you had a prior license and you're now wanting to cancel that license upon the issuance of a new license, you can submit that license cancellation at this time as well as an inactivation or a qualifying party disassociating from a prior license. Those items can also be submitted with your license application. All right, and then we have last part of this is fees. So the new applications will require an application fee, a license fee, and then your residential licenses are going to have to also cover the recovery fund assessment. When it comes time to renew, you will not have the application fee to pay, so keep that in mind. That is like your one-time fee. The application fee is your one-time fee when you're submitting a new application. All right, so we've kind of gone over the key things that we find in applications that causes your application to be delayed. Now, a lot of times people will ask, how long is it going to take for my license application to be reviewed and completed? So all of that is going to depend on your application that you submit. So if you follow the checklist, and Jonas, I would advise you to go to our website or click the link to the checklist because there is a direct link to the background check website. If you follow this checklist, once you've completed all of these steps, you should be able to submit a completed application with minimal to no errors. If your application comes through to us and it is complete and has no errors in it and it is reviewed the next day, it can potentially be approved the same day that it is reviewed. If we get your application and it is missing things, or maybe your background check wasn't completed, you didn't complete your testing, then we are going to give you what is called a deficiency letter, and that will advise you of all of the things that are missing in your application. And then the time is going to be on you. You will be given 30 days to fix those items or provide those missing items. And after those 30-day deadline, if it's not received, then we return your application and you would have to resubmit. So again, definitely use this checklist. Like I said, there are links to all of the different background checks, what's a acceptable government ID, your bond, what your bond should look like. And then once you're ready, you can submit your application. Your checklist also has like the out-of-state waiver, a copy to the tiered entity chart, your felony disclosures page, all of the things that you will need to submit your completed application. So once you've completed everything in those steps, it's going to be time to submit your application. I would personally suggest that you use our online portals to submit your application because we have created the online portal so that your application gets to us with minimal to no errors in it, and then it can be approved faster. Your online portal, if you are on a prior Arizona license, will also waive those items such as a statutes and rules exam if possible. If you completed your background check prior to starting your application, it will also it should also locate your completed background check for you. So we've worked really hard to make this portal fast, easy, and convenient for you so that your application comes through with little to no errors. If you don't want to submit it online, you can also submit it in person at our office, or you can mail it in as well. All right, if you have not already gone to our website and created a portal account, you'll want to do that. So you can see here, step 1, you'll want to visit our site and select the My Account login. There is a short video on the login page that kind of goes over how to create an account. And once you've watched that video, then you can go in and you can create your account and log in. Now, once you have logged into your, what we call your portal dashboard, you're going to want to make sure that you attach your entity to your dashboard. That is the key step here, and we'll show you that in one sec. Perfect. So once you have created your login and you've logged into your portal dashboard, you're going to want to add your entity to your account. This is how you are going to attach your business, whether it be your LLC or your corporation or your sole proprietorship or partnership, to your account. The biggest thing is you will want to make sure that if you are applying as an LLC or a corporation, you must have your AZCC active and in good standing before you can attach to your entity. Otherwise, it will not let you attach. So make sure your AZCC is active and in good standing. And then you'll want to add your entity to your account. Once you have added your company or your sole proprietorship to your account, then you can go in and you can start your new application. Once you have been issued your license, you'll also be able to use this same portal to submit updates to your license as well. When submitting your application through the portal, there will be a document section at the very end that you will want to update. So you can go through your portal application and you can save and exit. So maybe if you get to the bond page and you haven't gotten your bond yet, you can save and exit and then come back. But I personally would suggest that you have all of those steps to that checklist completed before you go in and start your application, just to ensure that you are ready and prepared to submit your application. All right, so just a couple of big things to check before you are ready to submit your application. You have registered with AZCC if you're an LLC or a corp, and you have all of the persons who are listed on AZCC and required to be on your application included and ready to be included in your application. Every person has completed a background check within 90 days from when you are submitting your application. Each person has a valid and legible ID. Your qualifying party has completed all of their testing or has a waiver to submit to waive their testing. And you have acquired a completed bond that covers your bond minimums and your bond form is filled out accurately.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that great info, Maggie.
Thank you.
Informed and ready. I hope you all are ready too for your application. So one thing that we'd like to remind you is that following today's session, within the next couple of days, I will be sending you an email that includes a link to the video seminar that we've done here today. You're also going to get a link to a survey. We definitely want to make this the best, most informative seminar that it can be. So if you could please complete the survey and give us your feedback so that we know what we can do better in the future. We will also send you a link to those applying for a license checklist that Maggie discussed. Those are really important. So definitely make sure that you have copies of those. They're going to be really helpful to have with you as you complete your application. And then also we'll give you a reminder that when you do complete your application, there's a little checkbox to let us know that you took this seminar, and that helps us track what kind of mistakes people are making even after they take today's seminar. So if you could please make sure to do that. And then to make sure that all persons DocuSign the application. And so that is that. Next, we're going to actually go into our question and answer time. So you can go ahead and take yourself off mute now if you